The conflict that I will be discussing is gun rights versus gun control. The target audience of this discussion needs to include everyone over the age of 18, those ignorant of the differences between gun rights and gun control, and lastly, those for gun control. This conflict can be very competitive. The credibility of people discussing this issue should be noted before sides are taken. The advocates must possess knowledge-based credibility in order to appeal to the audience. The advocates may exhibit the halo effect, where people assume just because one is credible in discussing gun rights, that they are also credible in discussing gun control. Forums where this issue can be discussed in a calm manner will be beneficial for all sides. I want to explain what each one is. Gun rights is the right to keep and bear arms. Gun control is the set of laws or policies that regulate the manufacture, sale, transfer, possession, modification, or use of firearms by civilians. The argument between these opposing sides is whether citizens should have the right to possess arms for their own defense, according to the Second Amendment, or should the government be able to revoke that right from the citizens. This argument is an example of zero sum. I stand by our Constitution and the Second Amendment right, which is the right to keep and bear arms. I want you to imagine being in your home and it's the middle of the night. You and your family are asleep. You wake up to a ruckus and then realize that someone is in your home. At this point, the scenario can go one of two ways. The occasion to formulate a plan of action is up to you. You can either give up everything you have worked for and possibly the well-being of your family, or you decide to take a stance and defend yourself, your family, and your belongings. One may argue that knives, a baseball bat, or even pepper spray would work, but when the invader is armed and you are suddenly staring down the barrel of their gun, knowing their intent is to do harm, your chances are then slim to none. The average time for a police officer to arrive is 10 minutes. That is from the time you dial 911 until the officer arrives at your house, and that is if you live in the city. Think about living in a rural area. All the cops may be on the other end of the county on a call, with the response time being greater than 20 minutes. Now, hero, what do? Your status no longer matters. So now let's say you own a firearm. You could hold them at gunpoint, or the minute the invader threatens you and or your family, you could then protect them from what could have been a tragic night. Now let's discuss gun control and the issues that arise when you take the person's trustworthiness about firearms into view. This clearly will not stop the bad guys from getting their hands on guns or keep them from committing a crime. Even if laws and policies are enforced, people will use the black market to illegally buy, sell, or trade firearms. Evil exists, and people will continue to commit crimes and continue to kill others whether or not they have access to firearms. While guns do nothing to influence the homicide rate, they do everything to keep caring individuals safe from being attacked. A lot of people who support gun control make the statement that guns kill people. There are no grounds supporting this claim. Gender and cultural factors are also used to support claims that guns kill people. In my opinion, guns do not kill people. People are the ones that kill other people. For instance, let's say you lay a gun on your kitchen counter. That gun is not going to fire by itself. It will continue to lay there. A person has to physically pick that gun up and point at a target and then pull that trigger. If guns were the problem, why are people arrested, sent to prison, or even put to death for gun crimes when they could easily argue the fact that it was not me but the gun itself? Someone who supports gun control could argue that this is where gun control needs to be enforced. But there are other multiple weapons criminals could use to commit crime. For example, prior to 9/11, Timothy McVeigh was an American terrorist that used a U-Haul truck, fertilizer, and diesel fuel as a weapon to kill 168 people in a bombing at the federal building in Oklahoma City. Another example is the 9/11 attack. Terrorists used planes as a weapon to crash into the Twin Towers in New York City. Not a single gun was used during these tragic events. Every year on 9/11, people gather to commemorate and memorialize this event. This is known as epidectic speaking. The public relives this tragic moment in history. Now, yes, there have been mass shootings around the world, but violence will always be here no matter what laws you put into effect. We, as gun owners, argue that weapons actually make our country a safer place, giving people power and a means of self-defense. In particular, they say that armed citizens can stop a mass shooter. So why take away that defense mechanism? It is our right to bear arms for whatever reason, and frankly, it is not everyone's business why. Firearms can and will protect us from a tyrannical government. And speaking of a tyrannical government, here's a good example for you. Let's think back in history. There was a certain leader that advocated for gun control, claiming that police would be more efficient and the streets would be safer if the government took all the citizens' guns. Then soon, the world would follow our lead into the future. If you haven't figured out who this is yet, his name is Adolf Hitler. This clearly shows that once citizens are weak, the government can and will take full control and do as it pleases. I hope this gives you a better understanding if you were against gun rights.